I'm going to walk you everyone through this presentation, but what we're doing here is we are actually sharing some thoughts and experiences of how we have adapted or incorporated smart planning in our system. It's just a bunch of ideas that we came up with when we analyzed our processes and our systems. So it's meant to excite everyone that there is a possibility of incorporating AI and machine learning as part of your planning cycle and make it more independent. And these ideas are not only applicable to mining, they could be applied to um, any manufacturing or other industry as well. Um, as as Larissa mentioned, my name is Hashim. I'm the CFO of Jaguar, and most of the ideas I presented here are either things we have worked on or we are currently working on. Mariana, next slide. Okay, so before we go into smart planning, I want to just talk about conventional planning and where does smart planning come in or continuous planning come in? Let's look at first the conventional planning. Um, it is definitely a much more linear process. And one of the things we observed through our experiences that no matter what, you have more biases and errors in a conventional planning process. When you're presenting a forecast, for example, to your board, um, the assumptions you take for the future, those assumptions can be biased. You want the forecast to look good. Um, are you building enough risk resilience in your plan or forecast? So, those kind of things can happen, and that's just the nature of conventional planning. Once again, when you do the planning, you have to go through each and every cycle of getting that approved by the board or whatever management higher authority there is. And what we found is that there's a lot less focus on value added reviews. It's almost like you get the plan updated, you make it to the finish line, you present it to the board, and we end up explaining more of what happened rather than focusing more on what will happen or what could happen. And that's a key differentiator. We want to take away effort in explaining and analyzing what happened and spend more time in what can we do? Where can we steer the business in the future so that it becomes a lot more value added. Now, one of the things I want to also emphasize is that Harvard Business Review did a survey on this, and it is surprising, but not too surprising as well, that 9 out of 10 professionals find that the planning process in any organization is extremely cumbersome and unreliable. That's a high percentage. 30% of time, management's time is taken up in as part of this exercise every year, and having 90% people thinking that it's too much cumbersome and unreliable is I guess telling us a lot. So we gotta incorporate smart features into this planning cycle. Let's go to the next slide, Mariana. So we've used continuous planning as a as a word here. You can call it smart planning. You could call it artificial intelligence enabled planning. There's various names we can call it. But I want to emphasize this is not a rolling forecast. I'm not talking about, adding another month to your forecast and updating your assumptions and going from there. No, we're not talking about that. This is primarily taking away human intervention from the planning cycle as much as possible, making it independent. And the way to do that as a start is to look at your planning cycle, look at all the inputs that go in there, whether those are assumptions or external inputs, and you try to automate those inputs. And that's the best way to start. Pick up an 80-20 rule. You don't need to cover the entire planning cycle on the first day and make it continuous or AI enabled. You can start with 4 or 5 big items which impact the most on your budget. And think of ways how you can take out human intervention and automate that update to the plan. These small tweaks go a long way, and they make the process very dynamic. The other thing, what we took an approach on this was we said we're not going to have a distinction between what's fixed cost versus variable cost, because when you're looking at a very dynamic process, anything can change in that. And what you want to do is you want to take a look at, the external input or the assumption change that's driving that plan change, not whether it's fixed or variable assumption. So we don't want to waste our time on that. In short term, and especially in today's world, anything is anything. In fact, everything is variable. We think that nothing is fixed. So we kind of adopted that philosophy as well. And what I want to do is I want to take you guys through some examples of how did we incorporate features of artificial intelligence and machine learning in our planning cycle. I'll give you specific examples of those. And those examples are once again what we have come up with as part of our brainstorming. But all of you guys can do the same. There's nothing that prevents us from making our processes more agile. But I want to make sure that as a starting point, don't be overwhelmed. This is not a process that is a big disruption. People like the word disruption these days, that pick up everything, tear it apart and throw it out and build up new. We haven't done that. What we've done is we've actually started with something which was already there, and then we started to make small tweaks to that. We wanted to make sure we capture the major impact of those tweaks, but the idea was small steps at a time will take us a long way, and that's what we've done. The idea was human intervention should be taken out of the process. Human bias should be taken out of the process. Make the process more independent. To make the process more smart so that it can learn from its own trend and then plan something for the future. Next slide, Mariana. So here's a few examples, and once again, I'm gonna go through them slowly and as slow as I can. But I want all of you guys to note down your questions at the end of this session. We've got a Q&A session. Come back to me with questions with respect to this. These are just examples. These are all AI enabled. These all have a feature of machine learning in them. Let's pick up the first one, pricing. So what we did was, you've seen that in most cases, what happens is you go through a periodic planning cycle, and whenever you're doing that cycle, you see whatever inputs prices have changed since the last time you did the update of your plan, and you make those changes. We don't follow that process. What we've done is, as soon as a new purchase order is signed or a contract is signed, we go ahead and we change our plan pricing. It is done by the system. There's no human intervention. Once again, the management team cannot override it and say, well, you cannot do that. Let's keep the old lower price in and ignore the new price, which is increased, because we want to make the process fair and independent. This is a small feature of AI that we have incorporated in our planning cycle. Another one is labor. It's a key component of all plans. What we've seen is generally when we end up talking about labor variances or payroll variances or labor cost variances with our fellows, we end up explaining a lot of gaps between the actual and the plan because people went on vacations that were not probably planned. They had to go on a sick leave. Somebody had to go on a maternity leave. There have been resignations and rehiring gaps. So we all thought that, how can we make those explanations less cumbersome for our planning cycle? And what we did here was we once again incorporated the entire labor module into this. Whenever we have someone going on a maternity leave, whenever we have somebody, for example, resigning, we have the system connected and our plan updates. We know that historically it takes us 2 to 3 months to fill that position, going through the interview process and whatnot. For some position, it might be a month we need to fill it up. The system automatically takes that assumption and leaves a gap of payroll in there. It automatically puts in, for termination, it automatically puts in severance in there. That's upcoming. So very, very small changes once again, which have made our system way more agile. Another one is maintenance, and I know this is one of the things which is heavy on mining companies because we've got a lot of machinery that we use, a lot of big equipment that we use. What we've done on maintenance is, I think somebody's got themselves on, I think it's Arena. You could kindly mute. Got some background noise there.
Okay. Irina, if you can go on mute, please.
Oh, sorry.
So once again, going back to maintenance, we've got wear sensors that we have installed on our tires and vehicles. These are, once again, off the market. You don't need to go to your big manufacturers for this. Once again, these are off the market telematics that you can buy, and install on your machines. These capture very basic level data, and what that does is it actually communicates that data back to your plan. So, for example, if my plan assumes that I am going to be consuming tires at an X amount of percentage or X amount of rate, what will happen is as I move along and my actual consumption, for example, is higher than my actual average consumption is higher than my plan, it will go and update the plan itself. It does not rely on me intervening and telling the plan that my average consumption for the past 2 months is different from the plan and therefore I need to update it. No. We do have flags that we've built into the system update cycle. So it's not that the AI goes in and updates the plan and nobody knows what happened. Of course, there are general flags that we have built in system, which allow us to inform people of what changes have taken place. But we have taken away human intervention. We've taken away human bias from that. So now the plan is updated and it does reflect a very independent view of how things are going. Another one, and this is another example because in the mining industry, the capex is a huge item. And what happens in a capex, we've got a capital expenditure plan, The CapEx plan generally lays out, when do you order something from when you expect to, go through the approval, the import, for example, if it's coming from outside, or manufacturing time lag, and then delivery to our place. That cycle is built into our regular plan. But what happens is things like COVID, and then you've got delays which you did not plan for. So what we've done is, once again, we've linked our CapEx plan delays into our plan. So if there is a CapEx plan um, that kind of is delaying our delivery of products, also equipment, we don't need to go and update the plan based on the process, the CapEx process flow. We can actually update the plan automatically, and we don't need to go ahead and have human intervention there. Once again, another example of AI incorporated at a very small level. Now, what does that do? Like, I've given you these examples. You're going to say, well, these are very basic examples. But what we are doing here is we're removing human intervention on some of the items which are key to a forecast or a continuous plan. We are removing human bias and intervention. And we're also focusing a lot more on what are we going to do about these changes, as opposed to explaining to the people what the changes were. So if my CapEx is delayed, instead of me going to the board and explaining them that, well, actually I planned the CapEx at this date and now it's this date, so this is what has happened. That's fine, but that doesn't do much for me. And ends up being a very, you know, it ends up being a cycle where I end up explaining to the board what happened and why there's a gap between the plan and the actual. What we want to do is we want to focus on what we will do about it. And in that, with this automatic update, now what we do is we go back to the board, we give them an output of what the system has updated automatically because of various inputs that come independently from outside. And the discussion on the plan is more focused on what are we going to do about it? The fact that my CapEx is delayed, what am I going to do? What is my plan B? If my tire consumption is going up significantly, what am I going to do about it? Am I going to look for another supplier? And am I going to go and find another solution for my problem? So that's the idea. Let's incorporate forward-looking thinking. In all of these examples, what you've seen is that artificial intelligence is incorporating the plan, or you could say it's machine learning incorporating, updating the plan. But you can take it a step further. We haven't done that yet, I must say that, but we are already on that thinking path. And what that path is, that you can always develop algorithms with your technology team that can enable the machine to learn from the trends and make suggestions to you as management. And that's where the next step is, where we're thinking, how can I utilize machine learning on the data that I get and produce suggestions that the management can utilize to make changes to their plan. And machine learning is something. It's a very broad term here, but you can actually utilize in different ways. So we're really in the process of testing that theory right now that how could we do that? How could we bring in machine learning to make advice to the management on areas where we can improve going ahead. So just some examples. Once again, keep these examples in your mind because as I go through towards the end, the Q&A, I would love to get feedback from all of you. Next slide, Mariana. So, people have asked me some questions in the past presentation that how did you um, how did you make sure that sorry, what was the critical success factors for your process when you went from this step-by-step artificial intelligence or machine learning or data digitization, whatever you call it? What was the key success factor? I mean, I think one of the key success factor I underline this entire process on is cloud-based computing, and you cannot achieve it. You want to make sure you've got enough data connectivity to do that. It's something we are very used to these days on a personal level, but even at our operations, we must have cloud computing, and most of us already do, but that's just kind of a underlying basis. Data digitization is key. You cannot, of course, run AI and machine learning or any form of those things on data that's, of course, not digitized. So what we've done in that particular aspect, I'll give you one very brief example, is if we've got an underground mining truck, it used to load tons, it used to load various things on it, and what we would do is we would our team would manually input that on an iPad screen, or before that on literally a piece of paper, and then that would make it through to the office, which would be input either manually or through interface into the system. And what we've done is we've actually changed that. I was talking about telematics that can be installed on your vehicle. So what we've done is now we've installed telematics. So when that truck comes out of the portal from underground, it automatically relays that data to our cloud, and this the data is immediately updated. We've got an immediate information at that point. So digitization is key. Removing human intervention is key. And in this entire process, what we've done is we've done simple automations. And as a result of those automations, we've identified we've configured the system to identify anomalies that can help us make decisions on the unusual items that we faced from day to day. Mariana, next slide. So, once again, the continuous planning cycle. I mean, I'm a big fan of this equation that you see there. This is not my equation. This is I read it somewhere that if you do 1% change every day, that's an improvement of 37 times or 38 times over the year. That's a big number. And if you have 1% reduction of efficiencies every day, you can almost wipe out your entire efficiency matrix within 1 year. So it actually tells you a lot. And the reason I mention this is in today's world, disruption is the big word, but there is a continuum of change that every company goes through. And please, they keep that in mind when you are dealing with automation of your planning cycle. When you're thinking about smart planning, take small steps, and I can assure you, at the end of the year, you would have taken enough small steps that your process is going to be way more agile and efficient. People and mindset is the key thing. I mean, that was one of the things which we faced. How can I let the system update the plan without my intervention? How can I how can I let the system update my assumptions, and why can I not override them if I disagree? Well, if you make your system smart enough and once again bias free, then you will see that there's going to be a mindset issue there, because people want control of what they want their plan to look like sometimes, and therefore mindset was a huge challenge, for us. In you know that's just something which is human. Um, you want to make sure the entire approval process for future plans, and I don't want to call them forecast because it sounds very periodic with that, but for future plan or whatever version of future plan your system is producing, you want to make sure, you know, because the machine is producing that plan at a certain level for you, you want to make sure that whatever changes you're allowing the machine to make, those parameters should be approved by the board beforehand you make those changes into your before you incorporate that into your system. So the fact that in my case, we already told the board that purchase purchase contracts leading to new contract signing leading to change in pricing of our inputs. That's something which we will incorporate as AI or machine learning into our system. We are going to remove human intervention. So we told the board. So the board knows, this kind of a change is okay for the system to make. So we collected a bunch of items that we made sure we have pre-agreed with the board, so that nobody can then nobody gets surprises at the end of this, right? And then you want to make sure you take up small steps on your maturity curve in terms of technology. As I said, AI machine learning is one thing. You can make it more complex after you go into that level of maturity. You can identify patterns in your data, and those patterns can then build up some scenario simulations, which once again can come to you as an output from the planning cycle, that Mr. Manager or Miss Manager, this is what you should be doing with the data, with your plan in the future. You've got a couple of options. You can go to scenario 1, scenario 2, or scenario 3. And that's what the next level of maturity curve is in terms of our planning cycle. We haven't once again achieved that. I'll be very honest, but I think that as the next step, I want the system to advise me on how and what options I have after it has independently made updates to certain inputs and assumptions. I want the system to tell me what I should do. Not tell me, but advise me. I'm going to be the one making the decisions here, but I want the system to give me those scenario simulations, and then I want that information coming from a very independent source as well. So that's the kind of thing what we will be building on as a next step.